Welcome to the Strong for Life podcast. This week I'm joined by Garrett Kuljian, all the way from California. I've been following Garrett's stuff online for about a year, maybe even 2 years now. And it was, I think one post that really stood out was your breakdown of the back bridge. And I said, like, when I was doing Ashtanga yoga, people were like saying just to breathe through it. And I was like, this is how you actually teach the back bridge properly. So I really appreciate you putting out that information, mate. But before we jump in, do you want to maybe tell people about who you are, how you got into the fitness industry?
Yeah. So I'm Garrett, otherwise known as G Money or the Supple Dragon. I got many different names for myself. um, so how I got into the fitness industry, well, I started mostly like in field sports from a young age. So I played a bit of everything growing up, but soccer was the main sport. I was never really the best overall athlete growing up. Um, as in like raw God-given like power, speed, and all that stuff. So I kind of just got by on my skill. Like originally, what drew me to fitness was to develop these capabilities that I was lacking. So I was more performance driven and heavily involved with learning more about strength and conditioning. Got really into Olympic lifting and powerlifting. Uh, like the more I grew an interest for it, I realized how limited my mobility was to get into these positions. Like the fact that I couldn't squat past parallel really limited my efficiency in the movements. So got into some mobility work, of course, starting with the traditional like smashing banded mobilizations that you would have seen, that were big in the CrossFit realm at that time. And then next thing you know, I was just kind of warming up for an hour and a half and, struggled to understand how to bridge the gap between strength and mobility to actually create some true adaptations. And so, fast forward to college, I played soccer in college, developed some pretty bad hip pain. Still been working on my mobility for years, which very much limited my function for quite a while. And got back into, ollie lifting and CrossFit after soccer, and it just made all my symptoms worse. And even developed like just nagging shoulder pain that persisted for years. And I decided very early on um, that I wanted to be, a physical therapist because I was already, pretty passionate about working on my own issues. I was about to start physical therapy school and thought like I can't be the physical therapist that moves like shit and is in more pain than his patients. So, I had to make a shift. Um, I found people like Ido Portal around like 2016 from his like squat challenge because
Mhm.
that was like the main thing that I wanted to improve, at the start of my movement journey. And then just went full in on movement and learning from him, learning for some other movement coaches, taking more courses. Um, I basically just told myself, like, instead of trying to fix myself and maybe get like a hip surgery, I basically try to explore the full potential of what my body can achieve physically, you know? And fast forward maybe 8 or 10 years, I'm in a completely new body doing things I never thought would be possible in this lifetime. Made a ton of mistakes, developed some insights along the journey. Basically, just trusting a process did more for me than any one intervention or one system could have done. And that's kind of the message I try to bring home to the people I work with. So, yeah, there's the story.
Awesome, man. Let's jump into flexibility. So I like as well what you're
Yeah.
saying about the mobility, and then all of a sudden you're doing like an hour and a half warm up, and you're like, oh shit, I need to go home, and I haven't really done anything. Maybe we can talk about some flexibility myths for people, because I think
Yeah.
there's a few people online now. You're in that category where you're getting really fucking strong and flexible, and that's quite
Mm.
new, I would say. Generally it's really bendy people in yoga or power lifters, and now there's people kind of doing both, which is really cool to see.
Yeah. So I would say a myth there is you can't do both, which you can. I mean, we see this in different realms of fitness. Like, you know, we'll use CrossFit as an example. They're trying to bring up multiple qualities at once. And if you do it right, if you program it correctly, you can certainly achieve all this stuff. You just really have to be efficient with your programming and make sure there's just no fluff. So what I mean by fluff is like junk miles, like things that uh, aren't necessarily going to lead to long-term adaptations. They might just be taking away recovery. So that's really important, because when we're training for two competing qualities, it's you have to be more efficient with the programming. So I think, like, if you honestly look at it at a point of, okay, how could we treat this like strength training? I mean, of course, they're two different forms of adaptation, but the programming is very similar. You know, if I wanted to improve my back squat, am I gonna? Yes, you could do it very high frequency, depending if the intensity and volume is accounted for. But say you're lifting very heavy, you're only going to do that twice a week, maybe once a week, depending on the person. And it's kind of the same with flexibility. It's like if we program it as sort of a strength exercise, then it's flexibility training starts to make more sense. If we treat it like very specific form of strength training with the intention of moving deeper into a range of motion, that's where we can actually start doing both. We almost treat it like the main strength exercise if you're training for splits, or if, say, you don't have splits as goals, you can use your accessories as dedicated flexibility exercises. But we see this all the time in other realms of fitness, right? Like, we want to get strong and more conditioned, or we want to get strong and put on more muscle. It's like you don't just have to do one thing. Maybe just at one point in your journey, you might just have to prioritize one, because we could do it all at first for some time and still make good progress. But then eventually you might just need to prioritize something. And I noticed that very early on for myself, uh, where I was doing everything all at once. I was squatting heavy, I was training splits, training, my joint rotation, stuff like that. And I was making pretty good progress all at once. It was slow, of course, because I know I wasn't just focusing on one thing, I wasn't specializing. And sometimes you do have to accept that the progress is going to be slower if you do have multiple goals. But I did eventually have to prioritize my flexibility, because I know for myself that's something I don't develop very easily. And I know if I gave myself a year or something, I could get back to my original squat numbers. Or, I came up doing explosive sports, right? Like I was built to, I was, of course, never the strongest person, but that was what I was used to. I was never somebody who developed flexibility easily. So I just really needed to prioritize that. And then I started making much faster gains, I'd say, within the past 3 years. So yeah, a little bit of a rant there, but
Yeah.
you can do both.
Yeah. So basically, like the main myth you would say is just historically people would not you maybe stretch every day or you do it at the end of your workout, but you're saying now train basically like you're training squats essentially, and you do maybe 24 to 48 hours off between your sessions, or 72 hours.
Mm, exactly. And we could play around with different programming principles. Like, you can train flexibility high frequency, but that just means the intensity is not going to be that high. Or maybe the intensity is going to be somewhat high, but the volume is going to be low. So you do have to apply like some form of strength training principles into it, because we see, like, with Olympic lifting, a lot of them train the Olympic lifts at high frequency because it's very skill demanding. It's very skill oriented, so it does require high frequency at high intensities. So you can get away with some of that with flexibility work. You just have to take into account what's going on in the rest of the programming. So I'll typically program something very high frequency if it's going to be the main priority, and like nothing else is going to be a priority. But if I want to bring up flexibility for basically the full body, then yeah, I'll probably train each area pretty low frequency, high intensity, some higher amount of sets, and really hammer it 1 or 2 days a week, and then let the body recover. Because flexibility training is very neurologically demanding, and very demanding on the connective tissue, so it does require some recovery. I would say, in terms of myths, yeah, just like you said, people treat it as this something that you do in the corner of your gym before your training or after your training, and they don't actually put solid intention into that practice. And if you stretch correctly, and I'm sure like, if you do a full intense flexibility session, you really don't have too much energy for much else.
Yeah. Can you get a bit, like, this is actually just from a selfish standpoint, like Um, yeah, like let's just say my goals are not, it's not like I want to get the splits or the pancake at all costs. I want to focus more on strength and gymnastic strength, like handstands and rings. But I also want to start, working towards like front side splits, pancake, back bridge, but not as a top priority. What
Hmm.
would you would that be like 2 days a week of kind of heavily focusing on them? Would like to hear your recommendations.
Yeah, so it depends person to person. I would say if your main goals aren't necessarily splits, but you still want to, work toward them and get the body moving through end ranges. I like to, when it comes to priorities of, abilities that we're training, I like to group things into something we're training at minimal effective dose, and then things that we're training at maximum recoverable volume. So our main priorities, we're going to see how much we can do um, in at a level that we can still recover from. So that would be the maximum recoverable volume. The minimum effective dose is something like we still want to make some progress in it, but we want to see how little we can do of it that we still see some progress and we still elicit some adaptations with what we're doing. So it depends. Maybe you would only need once a week for the pancake, and like let's see how far we can get with once a week, maybe a couple sets, 3 to 5 sets once a week. Let's see where we can get with that. And then if you're not making too much progress, maybe we add in twice a week, as opposed to say we started with 2 or 3 times a week and you're not making much progress. Then it's like, okay, maybe let's back off because we're already training all this other stuff at maximum recoverable volume. Say you're hammering a lot of gymnastic skills, hand balancing, and you're already putting a lot of your recovery resources allocated to that stuff. So maybe we need to back off in frequency with the flexibility and just drop it to once a week.
Can you
So yeah,
explain the
many different
maximal
ways to go about it.
recoverable? Can you explain the maximal recoverable volume? I've never heard that term before. So like, how do you figure out what that is? Is it trial and error?
It's all trial and error, honestly. Um, and just depending on the person, depending on their training history, you want to see how much they can recover from. And of course, if you've worked with plenty of people in the past, you've been training yourself, you'll have somewhat of an idea of like how much people can tolerate before either some niggles start to come up or they just plateau. Um, so it is something we kind of have to work on person to person and just try out. But for the most part, it's like if you're training something heavy, say I really wanted to work on my planche, which is something I'm doing currently. I'm training it twice a week, but a lot of sets. So I would say I'm kind of at that brink of maximum recoverable volume there. Maybe 10 to 12 sets per session of planche, doing that twice a week. That could take a toll. So I had to really dial back my handstand push up, and to the point where maybe I'm doing it for an accessory once a week. In some phases, I don't even have it in there, and I just maintain it. So the minimum effective dose can also be like how little do we need to maintain something, but we can also do like how minimal can we work on this to actually progress it. Um, so that's the difference between those two.
Yeah.
But yeah, whatever you want to prioritize, you want to see how frequent you can train it and how much you could train it while still recovering. While still
I
recovering.
I think this is actually an interesting way to go now. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
so many things you could be working on. So I'm curious, like, it's like you're talking about skill cycling. Like, I'm going to put this as my priority or focus. And in particular, I guess with the flexibility, and a lot of people are on gymnastic skills and flexibility skills. What advice or what have you learned, I guess, from over the years? Is it better to have this one priority or kind of multiple things and like dropping something completely like a handstand push-up? Like what worked for you?
Yeah, man, that's a great question there, because that's probably been my biggest failures over the years, is like trying to bite off more than I can chew and just trying to have way too many goals at once. And that's kind of the sexy thing in movement culture right now, is like, oh, we want to do everything. We want to get good at everything all at once. But I think the skill in coaching uh, is having the maturity to know when to let something go, when to drop something, when to prioritize something else for the greater good. Like if we bring up an area and that can maybe potentially bring some free gains to other areas, like what's the most bang for the buck thing we can prioritize um, at one certain point in the journey. And then if we get good enough at something, maybe we put that on the back burner for a bit, focus on more lagging qualities. So yeah, like you said, skill cycling, um, always kind of reevaluating what needs to be a priority. I think that's huge when it comes to programming, and not just trying to hammer everything at once and spread yourself too thin and then just, yeah, not even get good at anything. And I've been through so many cycles of that where, 2 years down the line, I look back at myself and I'm kind of in the same place.
Yeah.
But once I really started prioritizing things and let go of other qualities, that's when things really started to work for myself. So like I said, I went through a period of trying to bring up everything at once, and it did work for some time. So I was squatting heavy twice a week, but also training my side splits twice a week. Eventually, that just stopped working, and I was really plateauing in the side split. So I put my squat strength on maintenance. Just did a couple sets once a week, and then really prioritized heavy, intense flexibility work for my side split, and backed off on front split a little bit as well because some of those tissues kind of overlap. And then I made some pretty good improvements on my side split. And then I actually started to develop a little bit of uh, tendinopathy in the adductors. So then I dropped uh, some frequency on the side splits, dropped some intensity there, and put more emphasis on the front split. And then my front split got way better. So, of course, we don't want to wait until injury happens to cycle goals, but it just goes to show you, like, we never want to waste an injury, and there's always something you can train, and the more we prioritize something, the faster progress we'll make.
Was there anything in
But I'm
particular, like,
never, yeah.
sorry, man, can I?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I'm never a fan of just dropping something completely and just going down one rabbit hole of something. Like, I always have my clients, and I always want for myself to always be training some sort of strength, especially with the lower body, because that just keeps the connective tissue healthy. So, of course, we can make faster flexibility progress if we just cut out our strength work altogether. But, like, at what cost? You know, I always find the people who aren't training strength for their lower body in conjunction with training for the splits, they might get it faster, but they might run into some joint injuries along the way. So I would rather err to the side of slower progress, but just keeping the connective tissue healthy along the journey
Yeah,
with some
and
strength work. Yeah.
like my excuse has always been, but now you're gonna completely debunk my excuse because you've played soccer your whole life. Is I've played
Yeah.
Gaelic games, which you might have encountered when you were in Ireland recently. So Gaelic football and hurling, and
Mm-hmm.
Celtic hips. So like I'm like, oh, I just can't ever get pancake or splits. But I'm sure like your hips must have been in quite a way after soccer, like in your late teens, early 20s, were they?
Oh yeah, and I think I've read a few studies from looking at Gaelic sports and just the amount of, like, the prevalence of femoral acetabular impingement in those athletes. And yeah, all cutting sports tend to develop some amount of, like, hip impingement, and that's just a normal form of adaptation where extra bone is being grown either on the acetabular head or the yeah, I'm sorry, or the acetabular rim, which is the socket of the hip joint, or the femoral head. So you can get some excess bony growth there, which can lead to, like, some labral tears, some hip pinching, just some blockages when it comes to hip flexion. Yeah, and you might think to yourself, like, it's so interesting because we might feel these bony blocks and think, oh yeah, I'm just, my body, my anatomy, my bone structure, it's just not built for this. It's not built for these extreme ranges. And yes, that's probably right. There's people who have a way easier time building flexibility based on their bone structure and how things are aligned. But I don't like blaming bone structure right off the bat, like, because the muscles actually influence how the bones sit significantly. And I used to pigeonhole myself into that with those beliefs that, like, I'm just not I'm just not built for this. But
Yeah.
after going through the process, like now I'm finally seeing like, I might actually achieve full splits. I might actually achieve full chest to floor pancake because there's so much we can achieve by influencing the muscles without having to worry about the joints. The body figures it out, like we just need to, like, maybe we might not get, you know, full hip flexion, and our pancake might be coming from more of lumbar spine rounding. But you know what? At the end of the day, like, a pancake's a pancake, right? And you're still getting a lot of good flexibility progress there.
Yeah. It's always just like I find it interesting seeing people and like training with people and I'm like, have you done like gymnastics or dance? And they're like, yeah, I've done that since I'm 7. I'm like, oh God. It's like, but it makes such a difference, like the tendon and ligament development and everything. But what did
Right.
you find as well, like going into those deeper ranges? I found actually it was kind of around 2016 I started getting into more movement-based training, and I just went big into flexibility, and then I started getting all this hip impingement and all this. So I had this new range, but there was no strength in that range. Can you maybe explain what's going on there for people?
Yeah, I think that's very common when you start exposing these new ranges of motion that you're not used to getting into and applying force there. The connective tissue just gets pissed off really fast, which is why it's important. I like to find what's that minimal effective dose at first that we need to make progress without angering things, especially if the body doesn't have that natural affinity to get flexible. Because, and what happens too is when people push too far too fast, is they just start to hang out on the connective tissue, and they're not actually being active at end range. They're not using the muscles. They're not actually creating strength, and they're just kind of irritating the joint capsules and ligaments and tendons. So and that stuff just develops much slower than muscle. It adapts at a much slower rate. So we just have to be careful along the journey, and make sure we're recovering. Listen to the signs and symptoms. Okay, we're having some joint aches. Maybe we need to back off a bit. People talk a lot of trash in the strength and conditioning world about deloads, like, oh, they're not needed. You just need to auto regulate your training. I actually find that structured deload week has been uh, just so valuable for me in making consistent progress. Y'all deload every 4 to 6 weeks and just really back off on volume of flexibility training. And that really does help my connective tissue just recover. Even if my muscles are feeling good, even if things are feeling good, I still make sure I take that deload. So I think some planned rest is very important along the way when you're really pushing flexibility. So
What
yeah,
would be an
long story short,
example of
yeah,
that, Gareth? Like, are
yeah, yeah.
you going 50% on everything, strength and flexibility for an entire week, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll typically cut volume by 50 to 60%, maybe keep some intensity in there. Some things I'll keep just the same if I know it's something that doesn't require a big recovery stimulus. So, for example, like if we're talking about the whole structure of my training, I might not deload my hand balancing work because I know that's just more skill related. I'll deload my deep splits work and flexibility work because that is something I know I want my connective tissue to recover from. Um, and it's not completely skill related. Like, there is a skill component of flexibility, of course, but once you get past that and your technique is sound, then it becomes very biological. I don't think maybe beginners need so much deloading with flexibility work if they haven't uh, gotten past that stage of where they're still treating it like a skill. They still need a lot of exposure to these ranges before they're actually like really stressing the connective tissue. It's more neurological at that stage where they're just building kind of that stretch tolerance. They're getting their muscles used to relaxing at end range, that kind of thing. So that's kind of how it looks for me. So say I'm doing 5 sets of side splits. Maybe I'll drop that to 2 sets, um, and see how far in depth I'm getting. I'm probably not going to get as deep because I know I'll get deeper set to set in the side split. So by like 4 or 5 sets, I'm at my deepest range. So I know I'm not getting deep. I know I'm not stretching I'm not stressing my connective tissue as much on that deload week. So it's still, I'm still exposing my muscles to that end range, but yeah, I'm still allowing that recovery to occur.
Yeah, nice, man. And then what does your training look like at the moment, like roughly over the course of a week?
Okay, so I train 5 days a week, um, somewhere around 2 to 4 hours per session. Some of
Oh,
the flexibility.
Jesus.
Yeah. So the one arm handstand is one of my primary goals right now, and I will say that has taken over my life. So that's why I train so long on some of those days. The one arm handstand is a beast of a goal. So, and when you're trying to juggle that with other things like strength work, flexibility work, then yeah, training can get definitely, the time can definitely add up. So currently my Monday, so out of a 5 day a week split, Monday is one arm handstand work, some upper body flexibility work, and then some upper body strength work. So training for planche and one arm chin up. Those are my main uh, strength goals for upper body. I also do some handstand pressing in there as well. Currently doing that 4 days a week, very high frequency, very low volume.
Handstand pressing,
So
that's
I'll
like
also
press
work,
to handstand, is it?
yeah, press to handstand, Stalder pressing, L
Okay.
sit to pike press. So I've been recently, the past like 24 weeks, I've been doing some higher frequency with the pressing. I brought my Stalder press up from 3 reps to 5 reps recently, which was a big milestone for myself.
Yeah.
And training it 4 times a week helped me do that. So I did have a big priority of pressing for this past phase. But typically I'll only train that like once or twice a week and prioritize more of the planche work because that's what got me there in the first place. I think the planche had huge carryover for that. So that's my Monday. Tuesday I'll do some hand balancing again, one arm handstands, and then it's just primarily loaded flexibility for splits. So I train my side split and my front split in the same day. Not always how I do it for clients. I'll typically break them up throughout the week. But for myself right now, I'm training them both in the same day to free up some things for the rest of the week, free up some recovery, get it all in on one day, rest, recover, train it again later in the week. Wednesday, it's just hand balancing and some upper body flexibility, a bit of a lighter day. Um, Tuesday takes the longest, which is my flexibility day, just because that stuff is so neurologically taxing.
Hmm.
Uh, Thursday, I take completely off. I use Thursday to get a lot of my work done. Don't do too much movement. Maybe I'll go for a walk. I'll see a lot of clients that day in person. Friday is again some upper body flexibility, some one arm handstand, and then again some planche, some one arm chin up related things. So some upper body strength, maybe some pump work at the end, some biceps, triceps. Got to have it.
Gotta have that, man.
And then Saturday, yeah, of course. And then Saturday again, uh, one arm handstands. Very little bit. I'll just do a little bit of one arm handstand work, maybe like 20 minutes or so, and then I'll do some lower body strength that day. Just kind of maintenance for me at the moment. Just maybe 4 to 5 sets of some like pause back squats and some Nordic curls, and then just again some splits work. And that's the week.
Yeah,
I'll
man,
say
it's
my splits work.
continue.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. My splits work is more intense on the Tuesday where I don't train the lower body strength, and then it's a bit less intense the next time I train it on the day I do my lower body strength.
Yeah, it's just good to hear you say how much time it takes because any like
Yeah.
I really saw this when I was living in Australia for 6 years, and
Mm.
there's a really good scene there with movement coaching. But before I went there, I was kind of like anything over an hour and a half was crazy, and then everyone there was like, how have you trained?" They're like, "Oh, it's 4 hours." Like that's just like That's what it takes. You know, everyone I talk to who's like high level, they're like, yeah, I train like 4 hours, 4 to 6 days a week. So like
Yeah, yeah.
I I think it's important for people to realize that as well, because they can look at the stuff that you are doing or other people and they're like, oh, why can't I not do that? It's like because you haven't put in 20 plus hours a week for years. That's why, with like proper coaching as well.
Yes, like this stuff is not a minimalist goal by any means. And it's not necessarily something we're doing for health either. Like you could be healthy and pain-free and not train 4 hours a week. And in fact, that might actually be detrimental. Like we're crazy. We're crazy bastards in the movement culture here. Like
Yeah.
if you're training all three, skill, strength, and flexibility, like you just need to have the time carved out to do that, and make some sacrifices if you do want to pursue all three of those at once. It's just not realistic to say, okay, 3 days a week, I want to do all three of those, train 90 minutes per session. Then it's like, why even go down that route? Like, why don't you just pick, if you only have 3 days a week, which I do have clients, like they have 3 days a week to train 60-minute sessions. It's like, okay, let's not do all three of those. Let's pick one of those things and get really good at them. And then maybe at a point where we're good enough in that, maybe we can explore other realms of that. So it's important to, yeah, be very specific with what you want. If you do want all three of those, then you better be willing to put the time in, because it does take time. And if you maybe just want some strength, some flexibility, maybe not necessarily splits, yeah, we can get away with some 60 to 90-minute sessions, 4 to 5 days a week. If you really want to dive deep into splits, then maybe that's going to look like a little bit longer. I will say the hand balancing, that does take a long time, especially if you're
Yeah.
going with one arms, because now you take your two arm practice and double it because you have to do one arm each side.
Yeah, man. Next level, dude. I just can't like I was big into it and I could never go that type of volume, just too much, just from an interest standpoint. And now I'm actually focused on salsa dancing, which is
That's
so
your
cool,
skill.
man. Dude, it is so much fun. Like it's funny as well because like the complexity of the choreography and something like salsa, it makes locomotion look easy, because it's
Mm,
so like much more high level. I'm a complete beginner, but like it's a cool kind of practice. But yeah, as you said, it's just like what's the priority, right? Because it's easy now to talk to you and be like, oh shit, I should be doing the flexibility stuff more. But it's like, no, no, no. The salsa is the priority. That's number one, and that's okay.
exactly, man. And you're so right. Like you actually get into a practice like salsa dancing, and it is the thing. And if you look at, like, yeah, people who have done locomotion and like some movement culture related training like that, and then they go into salsa dancing and they still feel like they can't do anything.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, what's the carryover? Like actually doing the thing probably gets you better at some of the more isolated pieces of those things. Like movement culture likes to take away some of those isolated pieces in the locomotion work. Take some things from dance, take some things from capoeira, take some things from parkour. But yeah, just do the thing that you want to get better at and that you enjoy doing. So for you, that's your skill work right there, is your salsa dancing.
Yeah, yeah. What do you like with your actual business? Are you doing more PT, like as in physiotherapy or coaching, or is it a combination? How is that set up?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination. So in person, I have some clients that, it's basically, yeah, physical therapy. People coming to me with injuries. Some people are just coming to me, you know, they don't have any acute injuries. They just might have some like nagging pain that they just want to work through. Maybe some will do just like some actual strength and conditioning with some mobility work. Um, I'd say online, I work with more so people in pain. Uh, I'll do some assessments, some one-off assessments, give them plans, and then maybe we check in once a month, something like that. I also have people on more of the performance side of things. training hand balance. Well, not so much hand balance, but I do coach a few people in hand balance. But people want to work towards some skills. People want to work towards more intense levels of flexibility, kind of similar to like what I'm training. But maybe they also have some injuries that they're kind of dealing with in the meantime, and they want some kind of rehab work, kind of structured with some actual performance work. So I guess how I function online is like I kind of try to bridge the gap between kind of the rehab and movement, strength, performance realm. So yeah, it's a little of everything. Some people come to me just for injury rehab. Some people come to me to train around their injuries and still work hard. So a little bit of both.
What do you, with two questions on, it's, I guess you're seeing things through a good lens, like being a PT as well, is in a physio as well. Um, what's something you really like about the fitness industry and something that is very frustrating for you?
Oof. So I would say coming from a physical therapy world, what I do like is, people in the industry are now kind of questioning and being a bit more curious about previous beliefs. Um, like what you learn in physical therapy school is kind of very outdated. Don't lift with a rounded back. Uh, Try not to drive your knees over your toes. That's too stressful on the knees. Now I think, people are starting to question that a bit more and kind of look to more alternative methods and getting a bit more progressive with their thinking. And we're not just so linear in our approach, like, oh, the research says this, we have to do this. We're actually starting to question some of this stuff. I do like that, but that's also what I don't like about the industry is because now, like, look how divided information is. Like, I feel terrible for the average person scrolling on Instagram because I'm sure they have no idea what the heck to believe. Like,
Mm,
I come across this, I come across this all the time with clients. Like, they've done physio multiple times, and each one of them told me like something different, right? Like, oh, like every time somebody comes to me with pain, I ask, like, have you had physical therapy before? And then they'll tell me, oh yeah, I have. It never worked. Each one of them said something different. Like, I have disc related back pain. Oh, it's not actually your back, it's your hip, or it's your like relationship with your cousin you don't talk to anymore, and that's the reason for your back pain. Like
yeah,
everyone
yeah, yeah.
has
It's your childhood trauma.
something different they're saying. Yeah, right. And man, I feel like the industry is getting so watered down where people are trying to stand out and be something different and have some unique way of going about something, and everyone cares more about their own ego and being right than like the person in front of them's best interest. So this is kind of, I guess, what happens when the industry gets a bit saturated and uh, everyone wants to think they're an expert, and that's kind of led to all this misinformation out there and the industry being a bit divided. And you see this, like, that's the big thing on social media right now. It's like people calling out other accounts, people bashing other accounts instead of actually putting out some quality information that they know is going
Mm.
to help people. Which, yeah, sure, it's good to shed light on some misinformation, but at the same time, it's like it's so confusing for the average person out there.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Also, I think it's literally the problem across the board with the internet in that like
Yeah.
you get the answer and then someone's saying the exact opposite in every category you can think of. And I think that's the where to put your money now is you pay for clarity, which is hard to find a person you trust. But I think if you can find someone, that's what you're paying them for now because you have all the information at your fingertip, but it's knowing which piece of information you should be following. I think that's the real struggle for people in general, myself included. Um, so yeah, it's going to get even more interesting with the AI gets even more like gnarly. Um, I want to talk about pain and what do you see as with people you're seeing the most common issues people are coming in looking for help with?
I'd say hips. Like you said, people search for clarity and they resonate with the person's story. So that's my story right there. Is I got into all this because of my hip impingement and my struggles with my hips. So a lot of people, I guess, resonate with my story, and that's what they come to is, yeah, hip related things. Working, they want to work to things like deep squats. They want to, palm the floor easily, just build these basic ranges of motion, sit on the floor without pain. And that's, yeah, most of the things we're working on.
So for someone listening, let's just say it's a guy in his 40s, like an average dude from America, Ireland, UK, not super active, goes to the gym twice a week, walks 4,000 steps a day, has a stressful job, two kids. He's got a hip issue. What would be some kind of just nuggets that would probably make him feel better? If you could give him like three tips for him listening now.
Mm. Yeah, I think first of all, just getting him to understand what it's like to move his hip joint through his full range of motion, and just really expose his hip to just these different ranges of motion, get him understanding how to move through, hip flexion, hip extension, abduction, adduction, internal, external rotation. And just that alone, like if you educate what these ranges of motion are and you're firing all these different muscles that you didn't know existed, a lot of times what ends up happening is like they will get rid of a lot of stiffness just by the fact that they're exploring these ranges of motion. And, I think the first bit of flexibility work is basically educating the body on how to move into the ranges you already have. Like something like someone like that probably doesn't need to do like a ton of end range stretching. Like they just need to teach, we just need to teach them how to use the range they currently have available to them. And who knows, maybe that gets them into that deep squat they wanted. Maybe we need a little bit extra work there. And then to the point where we need to make some of those biological changes and really train more down the line. But yeah, first and foremost, getting them to understand their hips, getting them to understand all those ranges of motion, and then we can further see like, okay, what is the big limitation here? And then of course, when it comes to lifestyle things, the body, if you do have pain, the body can't heal if it doesn't have the right environment to heal. So we need to make sure things like sleep and just lifestyle things are in order, making sure their nutrition is sound. Although I don't tend to push that stuff so much in my coaching. If somebody has like I hate it when people are like, "Oh, you're not making progress because you're not sleeping enough or you're not eating this way," but it's like, man, look at their life. Like, yes, of course they would want to get more sleep. Like they have three young kids, they're going back and forth. It's like, here's what they can do. They can get 5 to 6 hours of sleep. Like, okay, that's their starting point. Now, how can we build them a better body from there? Making sure that that sleep that they are getting is quality, and yeah, like seeing how they can improve their function with what they have to offer. You know, I hate when people try to just push something onto somebody like, oh, if you're not getting out of 8 hours of sleep, then why even bother doing stuff? Like, well,
Yeah.
I guess just do nothing then.
Yeah, I think I had do you know Andrew Reid? He's like super experienced, one of the most experienced coaches in Australia. He's been coaching since 1991.
I'm not
Ever
familiar with
know him?
Andrew. No.
Excellent coach. He was on the podcast before Christmas and he made a really good point, which, you know, it makes sense. There's so much kind of bad information. He was like, the dropout rate in the fitness industry, it's like basically most coaches are gone within 5 years. So like 80%
Mm,
plus of the industry have less than 5 years experience. They're the same stats as like small business statistics. So you're kind of, most people are kind of an apprentice in the industry. They're only, less than 5 years. So they're giving a lot of the advice that people are hearing. And it's also a lot of it is like people who are single in their 20s as well, who are, make up a lot of the fitness industry. And it's just reoccurring. Wheel of, new people come in, old people leave, new people in, old people leave. And it's that kind of, I guess, unawareness of like what it's like to be 40, three kids hanging off you, stressed out of your head, and you're like, dude, you're like 25, like you've no idea, like you can train all day and whatever, you live at home with your parents and your mother cooks your meals or whatever. So it's I think a lot of it is just, yeah, the sometimes the coach just they have good intentions, but they don't really have the perspective developed yet.
That's a great point. And I see this in the medical field as well. Is like people go to a practitioner for pain, and that person just doesn't have the experience working with that actual issue, or maybe they're teaching somebody how to build strength and flexibility, but they've never actually went down that path themselves. They've never actually walked the walk. So, like you said, they're just regurgitating information without actually having any practical advice based on their own insights through training. So that's one of the things I don't like about the medical field as well, is it's the burnout rate there is high. So, people are putting in these 40, 50-hour work weeks, and then, they don't feel like training, or they don't have the motivation to train, or they just don't have the passion for it. And that's leading to lower quality practitioners.
Yeah. Do you want to keep doing the kind of 50-50, or do you want to go all in on in one area?
I don't know, because I'm still very passionate about training. I'm still very passionate about performance. I'm still very uh, heavily involved in researching pain and all this stuff, and working with people in pain. Um, we'll see. Well, I'm very much enjoying doing both right now, and I don't see myself just doing one
Yeah, that's cool, man.
for the time being. Yeah.
Yeah, great. What's something you've changed your mind on recently? Maybe last 2 years.
Hmm. Change my mind on. It's a good one. I would say kind of what we were talking about before is uh, juggling goals. And I always thought, yeah, we could keep hammering multiple different qualities at once. But then once I started noticing the progress for myself of dialing back and just focusing on a few things, that's yeah. So I always try to ask people what the main goal is now, and like how can we prioritize something. That's probably the biggest thing, the biggest shift in coaching I've made over the past, I'd say, 2 years.
Yeah, man, that's actually my
Another thing,
takeaway from today as well, from talking to
yeah,
you is
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that. Just a sorry, before you go into your next point, just
yeah,
my
sure.
thing to focus on now, like as the goal in strength is the handstand push-up. So from a like
Okay.
zoned in focus, would you be saying like the whole year, or like go really deep for like 3 months, or it just kind of depends on how quickly you make progress?
I would go all in for as long as it takes. Um, like, don't give yourself a set point, like, oh, let's do this for 3 months. Like, yeah, we'll see where it gets. What you'll get your handstand push up when you're ready to get it. So, man, I would prioritize it for a good as long as it takes, and how much you want to get out of it. Like, do you want just one handstand push up, or do you want 5 reps chest to box?
Yeah.
And then it depends, what else do you want to do after that? Like maybe a few reps chest to box is enough for you, and maybe you want to move on to planche and something like that. I'd say, like, man, having a movement practice is so funny, because you have one goal for something, and then once you hit it, it's like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, 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 totally. Very cool.
But
I
for
was
you,
very,
yeah.
you just really lit up there as well. Like you got really excited. That's
Oh,
great,
because
man.
dude, when I got into this, all I wanted was to sit in a deep squat, and I wanted maybe like a 20-second handstand,
Yeah,
and like here
yeah,
I am.
yeah. Yeah. That's what I think I've noticed that the areas that I'm really like attracted to is where people are just super, they're obsessed. So like I love the whole movement scene. I love specialty coffee scene. Everyone's like psychos. And also
Yes.
the dance scene now, I'm like, whoa, everyone's completely, they just start, like the way you kind of lit up there. That's what people get when they're talking about salsa or whatever as well. So it's a really nice thing to converse with people on.
And those are the people you want to learn from, right? You want to learn from the people who are passionate about this and are practitioners for themselves and have drove themselves crazy over all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like I moved to Romania last April and I didn't know there was a massive specialty coffee scene here. And like you've been to Oz, so like you know I suppose California would have a really good scene as well.
Hmm.
But it's crazy here as well. So you just go into a cafe and the person just speaks to you like for a half an hour about like the beans and everything. So it's a really cool way to just get to know people. Um,
That's awesome.
what was the I cut you off there, man, just before we went down that rabbit hole. Can you remember?
Yeah. So what I was getting at was another thing that I've changed my mind on too. As a physical therapist, I always kind of bashed the uh the whole system, how it's done in America. Like, you know, physical therapy clinics, they're just mills where you're just churning through a ton of patients a day, and then the quality of that just drops significantly because like how could you give 30 patients a day the same quality as opposed to just working with like 3 to 5 people a day for an hour. um you know what, like I did that after I graduated school. I worked in a mill type of clinic for about 3 years, and I was really burnt out because I was also trying to build up my business on the side. I was renting space out of CrossFit gym and taking in my own clients and running online training, kind of building up the Instagram, all that stuff. But you know what? Like I don't regret doing that. I appreciated the time I spent working with so many different pain presentations. And I used to always tell people, I would say, 2 to 3 years ago, like, oh, screw that stuff, right out of school, just do your own thing. But the problem with that is, if you go, right out of school as a private physical therapist, you don't have time to make those failures and working with like hundreds of thousands of people, and you don't have the experience working with those people because that's the time you want to fail when you're right out of school. Get those failures out of the way before you go off on your own and you're liable for everything. So yeah, I do tend to tell people now, like, hate your life for a bit, grind hard, go into these high volume clinics, work there, see a ton of patients, um, and you know what, just build the experience. So that's something I changed my mind on, the insurance model of physical therapy. Like I don't take insurance for myself now. I'm all on my own. I don't work for a clinic anymore, but I do appreciate the time I did spend doing that.
Yeah, there's so much to be said about just volume and reps, but working with people, it's
Hmm.
as you were saying that it's very similar to for like a personal trainer, like working in a big box gym. So I worked in a big box gym for like 6 years. And you can
Yeah.
kind of bash the big box, it's kind of similar in the sense that like it's a just churn and burn kind of system. But man, I got so good at programming. I wrote programs for everyone, like every day, like free programs, boom, boom, boom. And I was talking to my assistant coach about this recently, and he was just like he's doing programming now, but for online, and it just reminded me like he hadn't done all those reps, over time.
Mm.
And also people want to go from I'm a qualified PT, okay, I'm going to be an online coach. It's like you learn so much being on a gym floor, like even just approaching people and people being like,
Mm.
go away, like get away from me, like just
Yeah.
getting shot down repeatedly. It builds a thick skin, which I think a lot of people, you don't get that if you just try and become like an online coach from the get-go.
Absolutely, man. And outside of the fitness side of things, like you just get better at working with people
Yeah.
and understanding different people's lifestyles. And like honestly, like what keeps a person coming back to you is if they enjoy being around you, they like your personality, like you can have good conversations with them. Like if you come to my gym, like where I rent out of, and you see me and some of the trainers in there, like, and you listen to their conversations, like we're all just broing down in there, we're all having a good time.
Yeah,
It's nothing's like super serious, and like that's what keeps people coming back. Is like you can have real people conversations, and you tell the person you get the person in front of you knowing that you're not just some robot
yeah.
uh regurgitating textbooks and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, like just like getting your Tupperware into you between
Yeah,
clients.
exactly. Yeah, we're real
Awesome,
people.
man. Yeah. Let's finish up, mate. I'm conscious of your time. So I want to finish with some rapid fire. Um,
Ooh, okay.
given the choice of anyone in the world, who would you sit down for dinner with for like 3 hours to pick their brain?
It has to be alive. No one dead.
Either or. If it's someone that you want to do dead, you can do dead.
I don't like anyone alive right now. Man, it would have to be Bruce Lee.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's actually
Yeah,
no
I
one's ever
I
said
would.
that. That's a really good one.
Man, that's where the supple dragon came from. So that's
Ah, yeah.
my nickname right there. So I've loved Bruce Lee. Like uh, he's just been my favorite person ever since I was a kid. I learned nunchucks just by watching his movies over and over again.
Yeah,
But
like
man,
because
I'd love to sit down.
he must have been so unique back then. Because like now there's more people, you know, doing kind of this with Instagram, but like he must have been such an outlier back. He would be today still, like, but even more so back then.
Exactly. Yeah, I would
Uh,
definitely love to sit down with him, eat some dumplings, maybe introduce him to some greasy fast food,
yeah.
burgers and tacos in America, and
Awesome.
ask him some things. Yeah.
What books? Maybe let's talk about one training and one fiction, or it doesn't have to be training, just maybe a non-fiction and a fiction book, if you could recommend.
A book. Well, I would say if you want to really like dive into some flexibility, like Thomas Kerr's book. What is it? Uh, the Science of Flexibility Training. I'd have to look it up, but Thomas Kerr's good author. He's the guy who kind of um, coined like the loaded flexibility stuff. So a lot of like good
Oh,
teachers out
wow.
there, like Emmett Lewis, Ido Portal. A lot of them got a lot of information from Thomas Kerr's in his book. Of course, it's not an all-encompassing book for flexibility, but he really goes into a lot of loaded flexibility in that book.
Very
Um,
cool. Is he still
yeah, it's a
alive?
good one. Thomas Kerr's, yeah,
Oh, cool. Okay, great.
I believe so.
All right. Sorry, Thomas, if you're listening. We hope you're well, mate. Um, fiction?
Man, I'm not a big reader at the moment. Um, so I don't have too much to say about that. I do like some of Mark Manson's books.
Yeah.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That one was
Yeah.
kind of pretty pivotal for me when I was like trying to figure out like, oh, should I quit my job at the clinic? I just needed to give less fucks. I overthink everything. So I like that one.
That book must have had that impact on so many people. Like, should I leave my job, my relationship, move? It's like the amount of people that probably read that and were like, yeah, fuck it, I'm just gonna do
Yeah, exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, yeah, Mark
Uh, by the
Manson.
by the way, sorry, the Stretching Scientifically. That's the book from Thomas Kurz. It
Okay,
just came to me.
stretching. I'm gonna buy that.
Oh
Okay,
yeah, it's a
and
good one.
uh, and yeah, Red Rising. If you want to get into fiction again, man, Red Rising
Okay.
is just a beast. Like you'll just be everyone. It's like crack. Like everyone I've given it to, they're like, man, I can't stop reading this book. It's insane. So yeah, Red Rising. If you want to get back into your fiction. Um,
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, dude, it's so good. There's four books, I think, or five, maybe even six. Uh, Last question. If you could put a sign in Times Square or Dublin or anywhere where loads of people will see it, what would you say on it and why?
Oh, that's funny. I've always wanted to like clown somebody and like put their face on like a stripper's body or
Yeah.
like a zoo animal or something, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe let's see, my little brother, he's getting married at the end of the year. Maybe I'll do that. Like the San Diego Zoo, like a billboard and just like have his face on like a an octopus or a freaking I don't know. uh penguin or something.
So it's like you can impact so many people with this message, Gareth, and it's like, yeah, just
Oh,
your
okay.
brother and an octopus.
If I was to do a billboard, I would want to clown somebody for
That's so
sure.
funny. That's great, man.
Or okay, being let's be serious. Yeah,
I
if
don't
I
think
could
so.
give
I think
out
that's
one
actually
message,
that's your personality.
okay,
That's good, man.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, we'll leave
Yeah.
it at that then. No words of wisdom.
Yeah. Where are you most active? Where can people, if they want to look up more about your like content, your programs, like where's the best place to go?
I would say Instagram. That's where I'm most active on the stories. I post a lot of my training. And then now I'm recently trying to put out some more practical information with posts. So I do a lot on Instagram, YouTube. I'll post more kind of like video tutorials of things. So I'm starting to get a little bit more active there. TikTok isn't very interesting. Let's just stay off that. So I'd say Instagram and YouTube are the two ones.
Awesome, man. I will link that in the show notes, okay?
Yes, G Money Movement is the
G
Instagram.
Money Movement. Awesome, brother. Appreciate your time, mate.
Yeah, man, it was great. Thank you so much for having me.